Hello and welcome to the Youth in Government ZIG debate. This is our first ever debate held virtually, and we're going to be hearing from 6 Tristar gubernatorial candidates today. The debate will be moderated as follows. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to give their opening statement. The debate will then proceed with several questions asked by current Governor Kim. Each debate candidate will have 90 seconds during which to respond to the question Governor Kim asks. We will close the debate with a 1-minute closing statement from each candidate. Each candidate is allowed to rebut once during the debate to clarify a point or correct a misconception. We will be getting started in just a moment, and to introduce today's debate, I'd like to turn the floor over to Governor Kim.
Thank you, Tyler. Again, welcome to the 67th Annual Tennessee YMCA Youth in Government Gubernatorial Debate. I'm really excited for our first online gubernatorial debate. This is something that has never happened before, so it's going to be awe-inspiring in a way. My name is Claire Kim again, and I will be the moderator of today's debate. With that, we'll jump straight into the candidate's opening statement. First off, Simra Kazmi.
Hello, fellow delegates. Thank you all for tuning into this debate. For those of you all who do not know me, I am Simra Kazmi from Pope John Paul II High School. Living in such unprecedented times, it's important to elect strong leaders that will prioritize the well-being of Tennessee. And I know as governor, I can be that leader for our state. It is necessary to have a clear vision for Tennessee's future. Implementing laws that create a strong foundation is key to our state's progress. That's why my platforms are rooted in the building blocks of a secure future. For example, serving the underprivileged in Tennessee. During such troubling times, I understand that it can be an even more frustrating struggle to maintain stability for those who have already been finding it difficult. But prioritizing the well-being of all citizens is what characterizes a state that is invested in its future. Helping our citizens by providing resources such as more accessible healthcare, means for mass transportation, and a sustainable livelihood is what enables them to contribute back to the economy and create a productive environment. Another one of my platforms is bettering education. Success does not stretch far without education, and as governor, I will be the one to take our education system seriously. I will do whatever is necessary, whether that be increasing funding or addressing overcrowding in schools, to strengthen our educational system. Doing this paves way for an educated Tennessee that maintains success through productivity and growth. The last part of my platform is focusing on the health of Tennessee's environment. Implementing laws that incorporate the reduction of carbon emission and reduce the effects of climate change is what I will do in order to create a future for Tennessee where our future generations can prosper, unafraid of any detriment to the planet that they live on. With all this being said, I hope to elaborate more as the debate progresses, and I'm excited to participate with other bright individuals who are just as passionate as I am. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Ansley Skipper.
Hello, everybody, my fellow delegates. My name is Ansley Skipper. I go to St. Mary's in Memphis, and I just want to say thank you to the CCE, to Claire, to everybody who's watching this call for continuing to keep up with the gubernatorial campaign during, as my fellow candidate just said, some unprecedented times, which we've heard a lot recently. And I do think the times that we're in definitely present a unique opportunity for us to rethink what our state should look like post-COVID pandemic. With the public health crisis going on that really exposes all of the inequality in our system, exposes some gaps that we didn't even maybe know existed, or those of us that didn't have a chance to fix yet. And really a time of racial reckoning in this country as well, with the Black Lives Matter movement, emerging on the forefront of everyone's mind. I think it's an opportunity to rethink what a Tennessee looks like that is united, that is diverse, and that is open for opportunity for everyone. And it's extending that opportunity and extending that diversity to make sure that Tennessee is both an attractive place to do business, but also a safe and healthy and clean place to live. And so my campaign, of course, the first priority is dealing with the crises on our hands now. And that's got to be the first priority. But we also have to look at ways to unite and diversify and really bring together this state to come up with practical solutions. I'm well positioned as a political moderate to actually work together with all of the delegates that come to the conference, push their ideas through, execute their ideas to make sure that we come to a consensus of what will make our state the most attractive place to live and work for people who would like to move here and would like to continue to live here and thrive and flourish. So I hope by the end of this debate, you'll feel a little bit clearer about my policy positions as well as the other candidates. And I hope to be able to ask you for my vote at the end of the debate. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Juliana Abelo.
Hi everyone, my name is Juliana Abelo, and I am so proud to be speaking in front of all of you today. I want to thank you for putting all of your time and your energy into youth and government. I hope that you have had an amazing conference thus far. I hope that you have learned from your peers and that you have stepped outside of your comfort zone. I hope that you have succeeded and that you have failed, because ultimately I've learned more from my own failures than I have from my successes. I know that this conference is not what we were hoping for, but I also have faith in your ability to make it an experience worth remembering. Just by showing up, you've made YIG history. We've never had a virtual conference before, so congratulations on being the first. This speech is not the same as it was when I wrote it in April. Our environment has completely changed, so I changed with it. That said, all of the ideas that I'll share with you today are motivated by you, my peers. I've learned so much from you over these past 3 years. I cannot thank you enough. It's because of you that I am proposing a statewide carbon tax on large industrial companies. The tax revenue generated will help provide funding for statewide transportation, education reform, and climate solutions. It's because of you that I am able to see the stress placed on an education system that simply wasn't built to handle it. It's because of you that I have the courage to speak out against a system created to disenfranchise thousands of voters. We must dissolve these broken systems and build ones that work for all of Tennessee. I know that you have given me the tools and the confidence to do so. I believe in our ability to create real change together, but more importantly, I believe in you. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Holden Corby.
All right. Hey, everybody. My name's Holden Corby. I go to Hillsborough High School, and I'm so happy to be here at our first virtual conference. So I'm running to be a governor that'll pass common sense reforms that'll measurably improve the lives of all Tennesseans and curb the inefficiency of our state government. I've noticed a worrying trend in the state legislature, which is that the government is either actively working against the interests of the people or sitting on their hands when they refuse to implement common sense reforms in order to stifle social progress. The government refuses to expand Medicaid by accepting federal money, even though it could help hundreds of thousands of Tennesseans get quality health insurance. They passed a heartbeat abortion bill that violates women's constitutional right to choose just to make a political statement, and they refuse to implement gun safety measures to keep weapons of war off our streets. My vision for this campaign is to transform our government to suit the needs of the people and institute popular, common sense reforms that will improve lives right here in Tennessee. So the cornerstone of my political platform is expanding Medicaid in Tennessee so that over 381,000 people will be eligible for government health care. Right now, Tennessee refuses to accept federal funds to expand our healthcare system, even when 1 in 6 Tennesseans remain uninsured. And Tennessee remains a national leader in chronic health issues. We as a government need to signal that the government works for those who are uninsured or underinsured, rather than corporate interests or right-wing ideologues. We need to be a leader in anti-racism by passing laws that ban chokeholds, demilitarize police forces, and hold police accountable when they break the law. We need to be at the forefront of the green energy movement by implementing a cap and trade carbon regulation system and investing in clean energy sources to power our future. So most of all, I want to usher out the era of backward politics and bring forth an atmosphere where common sense reforms and practical legislation are at the forefront rather than taking a backseat to political sideshows and regressive policy. I'm really looking forward to participating in this debate and hearing from all these other candidates here, and thanks for tuning in.
Thank you. Next, Ethan Beggy.
Thank you, Governor. Hello, my name is Ethan Beggy, last name spelled B-E-G-U-E. I'm serving this year as Commissioner of Education, and I also serve as the student body president of Curringham Academy's upper school. It was just last year when I first decided I was going to put myself out there and run for governor at Youth and Government. It was something I was looking forward to, as I'm sure my fellow candidates here were as well. However, in March, our plans changed in what seemed like an instant. The pandemic grew in the United States, and we were forced to stay at home. The coronavirus pandemic has taken the lives of hundreds of thousands of Americans. Here in July, cases are increasing, including right here in Tennessee. To protect the lives of our citizens, we must act quickly and we must act boldly. Protecting Tennesseans from catching this horrific virus will take a concerted effort from the state. It will take leadership that knows how to listen to experts and act accordingly. It will take leadership that has compassion. Compassion that drives them to fight on behalf of the vulnerable. This year has also seen the death of George Floyd at the hands of Minneapolis police officers, a death at the hands of a broader system that oppresses people of color. Since George Floyd's murder, Americans have marched in the streets to demand the end of police brutality and demand racial equity. As a state, we must tackle these challenges of how to end police brutality and systematic racism head on. To solve both, we need leadership that will listen to communities affected by both struggles and listen to their demands for how to help their communities tackle adversity. It'll take leadership that has compassion, compassion that drives them to fight on behalf of the vulnerable. This is a moment in American history where we must act. We must fight tirelessly to end this pandemic and fight tirelessly to end systematic racism. I am not afraid to take on these challenges as governor because I'm not afraid to fight with compassion. I am not afraid to fight with compassion and fight for the vulnerable. Vote for me, Ethan Beggy, last name spelled B-E-G-U-E. Thank you.
Thank you. And lastly, Solman Kim.
Hello all. As some of you may know, I'm Solman Kim, and for those who don't, it is a pleasure to see all of you guys virtually. And my vision for Tennessee as governor revolves around the word equity, but it isn't as simple as the word sounds. There are underlying systemic differences of opportunity and social resources that can be seen in our healthcare system, K-12 education, and even in public transit. Healthcare is stated to be unaffordable by 81% of Tennesseans, which is reflected by the many adult Tennesseans left in the coverage gap. And in education, there are discrepancies between urban and rural schools, as well as racial disparities between students of color, Black students, and white students that we need to address and fix. In public transit, we see issues in our local systems where citizens are not properly able to or safely access transit and use it to their advantage. And these are just a couple surface level looks into the lack of equity in our state. And as the talk and understanding of equity in our community grows, we need to put in as much effort and work in our policies to create more definite and permanent change. And I have plans for Tennessee that I hope that you guys will hear throughout this debate. So remember the word equity and remember my name, Solman Kim. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to our first debate question. As of July 21st, we have more than 80,000 confirmed cases of COVID-19. The coronavirus is and will continue to be a pandemic that impacts our lives in Tennessee in so many ways. And that is why we would like to hear each candidate's response to coronavirus in Tennessee. That being said, I would like to remind my candidates that your stance does not have to be limited to health-related responses, but it could also expand to solutions to unemployment, economic recovery, school policies, and many more. To begin with, Ethan Beggy.
Thank you, Governor. Step one is a mask mandate. Tennessee is one of 22 states that does not have a statewide mandate requiring citizens wear masks in public, which is absolutely appalling. Next, we need to reevaluate our current guidelines on business openings and large gatherings. One of the reasons we've seen a spike in cases in Tennessee is our state failed to make proper evaluations on when and how to reopen. We created an environment in this state that is absolutely perfect for the virus to spread. Unfortunately, as miserable as it is going to be, we might need to take some steps back. We need more restrictions on large gatherings and crowds, and we need to close bars statewide. When we reach a state where cases are consistently declining, we can start to reopen slowly. Geography should play a major role in these decisions, as we must look at the conditions of each of Tennessee's 95 counties to decide on which counties should reopen at what time. And we need to be making these same evaluations in regards to reopening schools as well. In regards to unemployment, I am advocating for increasing the weekly benefits of unemployment from $275 to $400. Thank you. I yield my time.
Thank you. Next up, Juliana Abelo.
Thank you. First, I would like to take a moment to recognize the impact that COVID-19 has had on all of our lives. If you, a friend, or a family member is suffering from coronavirus, please know that I am keeping you in my thoughts. If you need someone to be there for you, feel free to reach out to me through social media. I am here for you. The impact of COVID-19 is unquestionable, yet had we had competent state and federal leadership, it would have been limited. In the short term, Tennessee should mandate mask wearing in public spaces and expand testing. There are 34 counties with 0 drive-in testing sites and 57 counties with just 1 drive-through or walk-in testing site. This is unacceptable. The state cannot possibly combat the coronavirus if we don't even have if we don't even know where the virus is. Before COVID, 675,000 Tennesseans didn't have health insurance, including 83,000 students. Schools were severely underfunded and we were 50th in voter turnout. These are problems that already existed. COVID just made us sit up and pay attention. We must expand TennCare to meet the Affordable Care Act requirements and use carbon tax revenue to properly fund our education system, which will better prepare us for a future disaster. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Ansley Skipper.
Thank you, Governor Kim. First of all, without a doubt, we've got to move to a statewide mask mandate, without a question. We know the CDC has told us wearing masks would drive the virus into the ground. We don't know if we really go down to 0, but hopefully it would help. And the main thing here is, you know, I'm not an expert. I haven't gone to medical school. I don't know about infectious diseases. I read a lot. That's a good thing I can offer, and I can offer listening to all of the other delegates and legislators at the conference. But most importantly, I've got to listen to the experts, and any leader during this time has to listen to the experts and elevate their voices and provide the resources that we need as a country to meet their guidelines. We have to start thinking about this differently than we have been. We thought about it as, well, we close the economy, things are better, we reopen it, we're done with the COVID pandemic. That's not how it is. It's not realistic. It's not how the virus works. We have to be ready to be dynamic. We have to close down and reopen. We have to move back a stage and then ahead a stage as things change and shift and the climate shifts. We have to consider well, we must invest in the technology that we need for schools to move to a dynamic system for reopening, in terms of some folks being virtually online if they're in an at-risk scenario, and some folks being in person. We have to continue the testing that we started and using Tennessee labs to actually fulfill those test requirements, hopefully driving the price down as we continue to expand our testing regime. And the state must continue to pay for those tests and allow people that are asymptomatic to also be tested, so we can really understand where this virus is.
Thank you. Next, Holden Corby.
All right, so the way I see combating the COVID-19 pandemic in Tennessee is that we reinstate statewide authority, and the lack of statewide authority now is actively making the situation worse. So just to present the hard facts, 1 in 39 people in Davidson County have tested positive for the virus, and the Tennessee's most recent record is on July 13th with 2,509 cases in a single day. So clearly Tennessee is getting worse and not better, and that means going back on our reopening measures and pausing that until cases show clear signs of decline. So number one, I agree with my other 3 candidates here. Mandating masks is clearly the way to go. That's what the CDC has said will limit the spread of the virus. And I would do this under Bill Lee's July 3rd law that allowed counties to mandate masks at their discretion. However, I would change this so all counties would mandate masks in public spaces where social distancing is not possible. Also, I would not open schools until case numbers decline. I know that the president has been a little wishy-washy on this issue. There hasn't been clear leadership, and I will not be afraid to put my foot down and say schools will not reopen in high case areas until these cases show signs of decline, until a vaccine is developed, or until, cases show signs of decline. That's the main thing. So right now, statewide leadership is kind of on pause, and everybody is really panicked in this time. And what I want to emphasize is that I'll be a leader that will make decisive action and make sure this virus goes down.
Thank you. Next, Solman Kim.
So currently there are 81,944 coronavirus cases, and Tennessee has maintained a pretty good testing capacity rate. We test around 8,000 people per day. However, the rate of daily coronavirus cases are too high, and there has been no substantial 2-week decrease in cases. So obviously, as you can see, Tennessee is not ready to proceed with its planned openings. And while rolling back businesses may sound ideal, I believe that it may pose as a difficulty for some businesses to comply with. So I think that businesses should be required to implement a no mask, no service policy. And like the other delegates said, we need to have a mask mandate now. And I think the Tennessee Department of Health should also allocate funding to provide personal protective equipment to public businesses, communities of low income, and also to more affluent communities that could also lack protective equipment. And depending on the vicinity, I think the capacity should differ at each location, but it should also co-align with the phase that the state is going through. And by following these policies, I think our state will begin to see a substantial drop in positive cases. And as back to school season starts, we need to make sure that our schools have enough funding and that the students have the materials to get proper education at home. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Simmer Kazmi.
So as we all know, the coronavirus is an intense pandemic that has hurt the nation greatly. And as Governor Kim said, and a lot of you guys have said, we have roughly around 80,000 cases in Tennessee. And I know the economy has taken a huge toll due to this pandemic, but there are ways to effectively combat the crisis. According to many experts, mandating masks and social distancing is the key to maintaining the safety of health and while still being able to work and contribute back to the economy. I personally believe that it is the civic duty of each citizen in our state to protect the health of others as well as themselves. And we really cannot move to the next phase of a more unstable and productive society until the situation is under control and the health of citizens is prioritized. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to our second question. Educational justice was one of my last year's platforms that I strongly emphasize and will also be this year's main focus as well. Although Tennessee is one of the fastest improving states in the nation in terms of education quality, we still have rooms to improve and also have so much work to do. The second debate question is therefore, what are ways for state level improvements to K through 12 education to reach high levels of academic achievement? And first off, Juliana Abelo.
Thank you. So really talking about improvements to our state education system while ignoring COVID-19 is useless. So let's acknowledge that our schools will never be the same again. We're all students. We witness the effects of schools closing firsthand. And this doesn't just mean a loss of learning time, because schools provide so much more than just learning, especially for our lower income students. For some students, school is the only place where they have a stable meal, or where they get counseling, or where they feel like they have adults that listen to them. All of these services are incredibly important, but schools just aren't set up to meet all of these needs. So now in the midst of a pandemic, schools are under so much pressure because they provide much more than an education. But why should they alone be saddled with all of these tasks? So let's use the funding generated from a statewide carbon tax to create new space aside from school, where students can have stable meals, get counseling, and be heard. This won't be easy, but it's time to reevaluate the jobs that we ask schools to do. Yes, this is going to take a lot of time and a lot of energy on our part, but it's a necessary step towards ensuring that we are prepared to meet the needs of Tennessee's children. So let's move forward together.
Thank you. Next, Simmer Kazmi.
So I really believe in the idea that education is the seed of success. And when I discuss my platforms, I always say that they are building blocks for a secure future of Tennessee. And so education is a really big part of this. To improve the education system, I really think that we need to address overcrowding. When schools are overcrowded, teachers are spread thin, and students don't get the attention or personalization that they require. When this happens, they lose interest, and this plants the seeds for dropping out. When we address this and do something about it, it will really help our education system, as well as addressing the school to prison pipeline. More than half of African American young men who attend high school in urban areas do not earn a diploma. And of these dropouts, nearly 60% of them will go to prison at some point in their lives. Especially during, these times of the whole Black Lives Movement, it's really important to understand that we cannot keep letting things like this slide, and there needs to be something done about it. And as governor, I will make this a priority. On top of that, we really need to focus on funding schools and make sure that teachers are held to a higher standard, because when they are, the students that they teach will be more successful. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Ethan Beggy.
Thank you, Governor. As Commissioner of Education during this year's YIG/ZIG conference, I've done a lot of research on this, and I've outlined my plan for improving K-12 education. My plan would call for a $2.1 billion, yes, $2.1 billion increase to the state's education budget. A little under 3/4 will go directly to funding public schools, and more being given to schools that currently have lower per pupil funding. Another quarter will go towards increasing teachers' salaries directly. The rest, amounting to about $40 million, will go into various other initiatives. Major increases in funding to public schools and teacher salaries will be especially important if we end up having to close schools again, as the money will be critical for helping both public schools and teachers financially survive. Of course, my plan was written before the pandemic changed everything. Our education plan must include funding for online learning for public school, which must be paired with a broader plan to improve internet access across the state to make mass online learning a reality. If you're curious how I'm going to pay for this plan, I 100% agree with Ms. Abelo, that we should have a statewide carbon tax and a cap and trade system as well. And I believe that will create a lot of revenue that we can put directly into our education system. And I also believe a mansion tax, a tax on the purchase of very expensive houses over $2.5 million will also help fund our education system. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Solman Kim.
I think there are times when there is a slight emphasis on improving education in only urbanized areas. So let's take a look at the rural side of Tennessee, where 1/3 of Tennesseans attend schools. And many issues over there tend to be overlooked due to geographical location. And research shows that students living in rural communities face more economic hardships that falter their development and success in school. And along with racial disparities in college preparedness between urban and rural students, there's a concerning gap among rural locals as well. So to address this equity issue, I think that we should revise the Basic Education Program, BEP. And at the moment, the primary driver of funds for BEP is student enrollment. However, I think that BEP should fund schools based on the circumstances of each student and each of the programs. And currently, a lot of districts distribute funding based on the students. And I think that student-based funding should be expanded to all the districts, for it has the potential to address inequities within schools. And we also need to address the lack of teachers. Recruiting teachers is one thing, but retaining good and passionate teachers is another. And we need to step away from out-of-field teaching, for it is only problematic and will leave students farther behind in academic achievement. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Holden Corby.
Okay, so Tennessee consistently ranks toward the bottom of states in overall education levels, and this is partly due to an underfunded system that could be greatly improved by a change to the tax code. A change in curriculum is also necessary to implement civics, sex education, and other 21st century necessities. So the way that Tennessee schools are currently funded is only through property taxes. Now, this is pretty problematic because property taxes have been proven to be racist over the past couple of decades, because the houses of Black families have historically been overvalued. So Black families pay 13% more on average than white families for the same valuation of a house. So, and on top of this, the money going to a school is confined to the tax base of that area. So in a poor neighborhood, only the small tax base of that neighborhood would go to that school, which means poorer children would get a lesser quality education because their the funds would be inevitably lower, rather than richer kids who have higher income areas. So their schools get more funding. Obviously, we shouldn't propagate a system where the poor stay poor and the rich get richer. So this is why I would like to change the tax structure so that property taxes will be evenly distributed throughout school districts. So again, each school would get the same amount of money through property taxes as any other school, which would make schools more equitable. And on top of that, funding coming from a carbon tax would go to schools that are struggling in order to get their students' education levels up. Also, just a couple anecdotes here. No vouchers ever. There has been an effort to make vouchers, although.
Thank you, Mr. Corby. That was time. And finally, Ansley Skipper.
So first of all, it's beyond time to reallocate funding from law enforcement to our education system. another candidate referred to the school to prison pipeline. It is key that education is the fundamental base opportunity to determine the course of really someone's life in any state, and including Tennessee. We also need to reallocate funding towards investing in our teachers. If we expect our teachers to invest in our students in the state, we have to invest in our teachers, whether that's paying for or paying off student loans incurred while they receive their degrees, particularly in areas where we are lacking teachers. In terms of curriculum, we definitely need to teach life skills, teach applicable skills. Includes sex ed, it includes financial literacy classes, and that includes showing students, particularly in high school, what careers are actually out there for them in the areas in which they're studying. Show them a path forward into the real world beyond high school, and set people up for success that may not have the opportunity to attend college otherwise. We need to develop the opportunities there for people who that is not an option for. And then, of course, that's a whole different conversation about education post K through 12, which we don't have time to get into, but is also worth considering.
Thank you, Ms. Skipper. Ms. Abelo has indicated that she wanted to use her rebuttal bonus. So Ms. Abelo, you have a minute.
Thank you. So I would like to emphasize that this isn't just a school to prison pipeline that we're talking about. It's just a prison pipeline. Every single system that we have built in Tennessee, our voting system, our education system, tax system, police system, they're all set up to work against Black and brown people. We need to completely dismantle these systems and work to build a Tennessee that actually provides equity and works for everyone. As governor, you can be sure that I will put all of my time and my energy into helping us get there. I know that I don't have all the answers, but I also know that you are a really amazing and smart group of individuals who can help me find all the answers. So together, we're going to work to dismantle these systems, build Tennessee that actually works for all of our citizens, not just the rich white ones.
Thank you. Mr. Beggy, you may begin your rebuttal. Starting now.
Thank you, Governor. A lot of wonderful stuff has been said here. I do want to talk a little bit about my plan to fund schools based off their per pupil funding. I want to try to get each school in the state to be directly state funded, to where each school will have around $12,000 in per pupil funding. So that's $12,000 per student. Currently, our state is at $9,000 on average, and some of our richest schools, drawing from very rich white areas, are around $12,000. So I think if we are able to get each public school in the state of Tennessee to be roughly equivalent, we can help get rid of some of those racial disparities in education, some of those economic disparities in education. I think that would be a major improvement if we got the state directly involved in funding. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we'll move on to our last question. As the election day approaches, we have to keep in mind that Tennessee is ranked last in the nation for voter turnout, and it's nearly as bad as that in voter registration. Here we face a severe problem, getting our residents to the polls. What are your solutions to help Tennessee rise above their current status in voter turnout? Starting with Mr. Corby.
Okay, so Tennessee's status as the state with the poorest voter turnout showing isn't an accident. It's the result of poor education and measures taken by the state to stifle voter registration efforts. So first off, we need to reverse this worrying trend by enabling citizens to vote by mail, especially in this time where COVID-19 is prevalent. It's simply not safe to allow people to congregate in high density areas such as polling stations. So what we need to do is do as Colorado, Hawaii, Oregon, Washington, and Utah have already done, and allow people to vote by mail to be safe during COVID, and retain that policy after a vaccine is developed to make voting more accessible to all citizens. Also, I'd like to emphasize my plan for a civics education program that will cover the basic function of government and voting and registering to vote. So also, this has kind of been dropped from schools since the 60s, but like some worrying trends are that only 1 in 3 Americans can name any of the branches of government, and only a fourth can name all 3. So when our citizens don't have a fundamental understanding of the government, I believe they don't really feel any responsibility to contribute to it, and they don't have the access to contribute to it because of racist voter suppression laws, like a law passed in May 2nd, 2019, that requires groups with more than 100 registrants to complete voter registration training and provide massive fines for people who fill out forms incorrectly. So this has been used again and again by southern states to stifle Black votes, and I would overturn this.
Thank you. Next, Ms. Kasmi.
I think a lot of people express that they're unable to vote due to their tight work schedules. And I think in order to solve this, I propose that Election Day should be a state holiday. In doing this, employers can provide paid leave for a few hours in order to let citizens fulfill their responsibility to vote. Other ways that we can increase voter turnout in our state is to automatically register eligible citizens to vote. I really think that would be necessary and it'd be very helpful, as well as proportionally allocating our electoral college votes and expanding early voting. All of these solutions would reduce Tennessee voter apathy and make sure that the voices of Tennessee voters are heard. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Ms. Abelo.
Thank you. So I believe that there are a few key pieces of legislation that would quickly and effectively increase voter turnout. The first is automatic voter registration. This means that Tennesseans won't have to think twice before being registered. It means more engagement in our democracy and therefore a stronger democracy. We must also eliminate ex-offender disenfranchisement laws, which blatantly target the Black community. These laws are unacceptable. It's clear voter suppression. We cannot claim to be a democracy when we leave entire populations out of our elections. Finally, we have a statewide lack of a civic education. 60% of rural youth think that their communities are civic education deserts. This means that neither their school curriculum or their extracurricular activities offer a civic education. And only 50% of eligible voters aged 18 to 29 voted in the 2016 general election. These two statistics are undoubtedly correlated. Tennessee is currently 50th in voter turnout. Improving our education system to include a civic education means increasing our voter turnout, which is vital to the strength of our democracy. So let's tackle these two issues with a coordinated education-based approach.
Thank you. Next, Ms. Skipper.
So of course, we do need a more robust civics education program in our schools. We need automatic voter registration. We need same-day voter registration if you've moved in from out of state. We need to allow convicted criminals to vote, whether they're still in prison or whether they have completed their parole as in some other states. We also need to change how Tennessee allocates our electoral votes in the electoral college system to proportional allocation based on the popular vote to make it more representative of the votes of all Tennesseans and allow Tennesseans to see how their vote actually counts. Election Day should be a state holiday. And also, we need to lower the threshold for third-party and independent candidates to get on the ballot in Tennessee. Right now, it takes a strong showing in a presidential or other statewide election to actually make it on the ballot in Tennessee. So the Libertarian candidate, which that's actually a pretty popular third party, there's a very high threshold for a Libertarian to actually get on the ballot in Tennessee, as well as other political parties. So if Tennesseans can see more candidates, see an opportunity for themselves maybe even to run for office, and to see candidates that really represent their values, they'll also be more invested in the system, as well as all the other things that we've discussed.
Thank you. Next, Ms. Kim.
So I think to increase voter turnout, we should adopt automatic voter registration, as many other candidates said. And more specifically, automatic voter registration will obviously automatically register eligible citizens to vote once they interact with a government agency such as the DMV. And it's a very efficient and effective way to easily register a mass amount of people who vote to vote and to update prior information. And hopefully this will boost civic engagement. And automatic voter registration gets rid of the hassle of registering to vote, which already gets rid of one huge hurdle for many citizens. And in Oregon, once citizens were registered, they were once again sent a letter to opt out. And AVR would replace our opt-in system with an opt-out one. And our current opt-in system leaves part of our democratic voices, such as minority groups and young people at home. And in Oregon, AVR diversified voter rolls, and half of the people that were automatically registered were youth, and youth voice truly matters. Youth voice is vital right now and in the future. So and Oregon also saw an increase in voter turnout. So I think that Tennessee needs this push, and AVI can be the first big modern step towards encouraging Tennesseans to exercise their right to vote.
Thank you. And lastly, Mr. Beggy, sorry.
Thank you, Governor. There are many steps we need to take to increase voter turnout in Tennessee. Step one, get rid of voter ID laws, which only serve to disenfranchise voters, especially Black and brown voters, from casting a ballot in Tennessee. We must get rid of this modern day poll tax. Next, automatic voter registration, as many of my fellow candidates have stated their support for. Third, make Election Day a national holiday so people don't have to worry about their work schedule. Fourth, expanding civics classes like many of my fellow candidates have also proposed. And fifth, we must increase voting by mail, which is especially important during this time. Many Americans do not want to vote in person this election because of the coronavirus. We must make sure we have the ability to grant anyone who wants to the option to vote by mail. We also must make sure our vote tabulating systems are adequately funded and ready to handle a massive increase in mail-in ballots. And this shouldn't just be a coronavirus solution. Once this pandemic's over, we should still be increasing vote by mail. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Skipper, you're up for rebuttal bonus.
Thank you, Governor. I just wanted to take a few seconds, not a few minutes, to talk about a situation in our country which we've all been aware of, which has been the state of Georgia, with voter suppression there, particularly being an example of what could happen in this election around the country. And I think it's important to think about ways to keep partisan politics out of our election system in terms of allowing nonpartisan commissions to draw congressional districts, also turning over some of the election arrangement responsibilities to nonpartisan bureaucrats, as opposed to the Secretary of State, which is popularly elected and can be running for governor at the same time that he's purging the rolls in his state. So it's important to think about ways to take politics out of the right to vote, because in our republic, it doesn't matter whether you're a Republican or a Democrat or neither. You should still have the right to vote like anybody else, and it shouldn't be a partisan game who gets to vote.
Thank you. And Mr. Corby, you're up next.
Okay, so I would just like to elaborate on that voter suppression tactic that Bill Lee passed in 2019. So basically, it requires all voter registration drives to submit all forms within 10 days of being collected, which is just unreasonable. And it allows those who submit incomplete or incorrect data to be fined up to $10,000. My fellow candidates up here have mentioned measures by other states to suppress votes, and this is clearly one of the most egregious instances. So this is, again, one of those other times when the state government actively works against the will of the people by taking voters who should have been registered or their forms should have been thrown out, and then putting such a heavy fine on them that they won't want to participate in the political system in the future. And it penalizes those nonpartisan organizations that try to register voters to make our political system better. So again, another point in the trend where we need to reverse backward politics and implement common sense reforms.
Thank you, Mr. Corby. If we don't have any more candidates wishing to use their rebuttal chances, we will move to the closing statements. Each candidate has up to 1 minute for their closing statement. The issues do not have to be specifically limited to the ones that we talked about today, but it could be about your main platforms or whatever issues that wasn't mentioned in the debate. And with that being said, Ms. Kim, you're up.
So let's flash back to 2 years ago when I first joined ZIG. I was quite shy and pretty quiet, and I was a freshman, and I knew nothing about government, nor about ZIG either. But in my freshman year of youth and government, I ran for office, and on the verge of throwing up, I got on that podium and gave a speech that I can't even remember, and it's not exactly my favorite memory. So if you ask me if I would ever run again after that, I would say no, without a doubt. So how am I here now? Well, I'm here because my first ZIG sparked this passion for Tennessee and for you all. This is the center of where youth voice lies, and it's vital for youth voice to be heard. And I know that the delegates have a lot to say and will only work to better Tennessee. So vote for me, Solomon Kim, to join me in this marathon to achieve equity all across Tennessee. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, Ms. Skipper.
Thank you, everybody, for watching. Thank you to the CCE again for trying this non-traditional platform, and everybody for being here. I do think it's important and want to mention that criminal justice will be a huge issue that I will focus on as governor, divesting funding from law enforcement and putting that towards education, abolishing the bail system, investing in our public defender department, and abolishing mandatory minimums, as well as decriminalizing drug use. These are bigger issues and we don't have the time to get into all of them, but the bottom line of my platform is that I want to create community in Tennessee and I want to restore opportunity for anyone and everyone in Tennessee. I think about laws like Governor Lee's adoption law. It hit particularly close to home. That is not the kind of state that we are, and that's not the kind of state that we want to be. We want to be an open, welcoming state that provides opportunity for all of our citizens. And that's the kind of Tennessee that I will work with you and listen to your voices to help build. And I will put forward unity, creativity, and empathy to get that done. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Corby.
All right, so first I just want to say a big thank you to our CCE for setting up this virtual conference. And thanks to everybody attending the conference for taking time out of your schedules to come and listen to all our candidates and debate. It really is inspiring to see. So also, I just want to shine a light on something that hasn't been discussed in detail in this debate. We said we didn't have time to, which is the Black Lives Matter movement. So after the brutal killings of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and so many other Black men and women at the hands of the police, it's seriously time to take a reckoning at our state's past and our racial history and make right those things that have been wrong. So one of these instances has been the removal of the Nathan Bedford Forrest bust in the Capitol, but this is kind of a floor and not a ceiling. We need to go above and beyond in showing that our state is anti-racist. So one of those ways we can do is ban chokeholds. We can pass this George Floyd Act, which is a bipartisan series of 8 amendments to TN House Bill 2291. It's currently going through Congress. And all of these measures that'll make our state a more equitable place for all of our citizens. And so furthermore, I also want to mention my main campaign platform. Something I want to repeat is that I'm a candidate that will put forward common sense reforms and practical policies.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Mr. Beggy.
Thank you all so much for welcoming me to this debate. It's really been an honor. I know this isn't exactly how we wanted it to go, but it's been great. Thank you so much to the CCE for creating this online version of YIG. There's one important topic that many candidates touched on, but we did not get a direct question on tonight. And that's in the aftermath of the death of George Floyd, we must ask ourselves what we can do to help reduce police brutality and end systematic racism. As governor, I will fight for both of these goals as 2 of my top priorities. Policies I will fight for include banning police chokeholds, ending qualified immunity, creating a state oversight board to regulate the use of deadly force by officers, creating a state prosecutorial board, or state prosecutorial office to charge cases of police violence, and other policies. There are multiple more policies. I don't have much time to get into in this, but please, for more information, follow my Instagram at @EthanForGovernorYig. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Ms. Kasmi.
Thank you. This has been an amazing opportunity that I'm so grateful for. I hope all of you delegates have understood how firm I am in implementing laws that create a successful Tennessee, whether it be through bettering education, our environment, or serving the underprivileged, or ending systematic racism. I really hope to address all of the ideas that you fellow delegates have to secure our state's well-being. Furthermore, I really want to help make YIG an amazing experience for all of you guys, despite the challenges that it might face during these times of uncertainty. But regardless, please vote for me, Summer Kasmi. Thank you.
Thank you. And lastly, Ms. Abelo.
Thank you. So you've heard a lot of amazing ideas tonight from a lot of amazing people, but I have one last argument to make. In conferences like this one, what matters most is passion. My policies are motivated by multiple years of experience and activism. I've talked to real Tennesseans firsthand. I've met with Tennessee state senators. I've even spoken in front of a Senate committee, and I've worked on 3 different political campaigns. I have the experience and I have the passion. I'm passionate because this conference gave me the confidence to speak up for myself. I'm passionate because I understand the power of learning from each other. I'm passionate because I know that I only started to believe in myself once I saw that you believed in me. I can only hope that you will see my vision, hear my passion, and believe in me as much as I believe in you. Thank you.
Thank you. And that is it for this year's gubernatorial debate. Thank you for tuning in, guys.
I'd like to take a quick moment to thank all 6 candidates for taking some time to appear in tonight's gubernatorial debate. I thank you for your insight, your passion, and your wisdom. Voters, you certainly have a difficult choice ahead of you. I'd also like to take a moment to thank Governor Kim for moderating tonight's debate. You've done a wonderful job, and I cannot wait for the rest of the conference. To all you ZIG delegates watching, thank you and have a good night.